So you wanted to deep dive into the number 13, huh?
Yeah, I thought it would be interesting to explore, beyond just the whole unlucky number thing.
Yeah, I get that. Honestly, when you first suggested, I was like, really? A whole deep dive on the number 13.
Mm.
But then I started going through all the stuff you sent, all the articles and research, and wow, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, right?
Right, exactly. It's like
Yeah,
this weird thing, we say it's unlucky, we avoid it like the plague, but where did that even come from?
it's true. Like, do we learn to be afraid of 13? Or is there something deeper, something hardwired into us?
Well, to understand that, we have to go way back in time, like way, way back. Think ancient Mesopotamia.
Okay, back to the cradle of civilization. What did those folks have to do with the number 13?
Well, the Mesopotamians were all about order and symmetry. Their number system was based on 12. Think about it. 12 months, 12 zodiac signs.
Right, everything nice and neat, divisible by 2, 3, 4, 6.
Exactly. It just made sense to them. It reflected a kind of cosmic balance, but 13 messed that all up.
It's like the odd one out, the one that doesn't quite fit.
Precisely. It represented the unknown, the unpredictable, and that made them uneasy.
And isn't it interesting how those ancient anxieties still resonate with us today?
It's really incredible, isn't it, that something so seemingly insignificant as a number can carry so much weight across millennia. And it's not just Mesopotamia, this fear of 13, it pops up across cultures and throughout history. Think about the Last Supper.
13 guests.
Yeah.
We all know how that ended.
Exactly. Whether you're religious or not, that image, Judas the betrayer as the 13th guest, it's powerful.
It stayed with us. It's like this cultural touchstone for bad omens and unfortunate events.
Absolutely. And you see a similar theme in Norse mythology, too.
Oh, really? I always think of those Norse gods as being pretty hardcore, not really the type to be bothered by a little thing like the number 13.
Well, Loki, the trickster god, he shows up as the 13th guest at a divine feast, throwing everything off kilter.
Uh-oh, this can't be good.
Not good at all. Loki's presence disrupts the harmony of the gathering and ultimately leads to the death of Balder, the god of light.
Okay, so we've got the Mesopotamians, the early Christians, the Norse gods, all with this deep-seated superstition surrounding the number 13.
It's a pattern, isn't it? And that brings us to perhaps the most well-known superstition of them all, Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th, each one on its own has kind of a dark history, but together.
Together, they create this potent symbol of bad luck and misfortune, like this perfect storm of superstition.
Exactly, and it's not just ancient history either. Pop culture has had a field day with Friday the 13th.
Oh, absolutely. You can't talk about Friday the 13th without mentioning those iconic horror movies. They've definitely cemented this date in our minds as a day for scary happening.
For sure. Although, I have to say, for every scary movie about Friday the 13th, there's an athlete out there like, what was it, Wilt Chamberlain? He wore number 13 with pride, dominated on the court.
Right. It's almost as if 13 becomes this blank canvas onto which we project our fears and anxieties, or in some cases, our aspirations.
Okay, so far we've talked about how different cultures throughout history have kind of viewed 13, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a lot of them, well, they weren't fans.
To put it mildly.
Yeah. But what about numerology? I'm curious to get, numerology's take on all this.
It's interesting. In numerology, 13 often gets a bit of a bad rap, much like we've seen historically.
Really? So even numerology sees it as unlucky.
Well, it's a little more nuanced than that. Some numerologists associate 13 with, like, major upheaval, transformation.
Transformation, huh? That sounds kind of intense.
It can be. Think about it like sometimes you got to tear things down to build something new, right?
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right. So 13 can represent that kind of energy. It's like this force for radical change, pushing us out of our comfort zones, even if it gets a little messy along the way.
So not necessarily unlucky, but definitely a little disruptive.
Exactly. It's about breaking down those old structures, shaking things up to make way for something new. It can be intense, but also incredibly liberating.
Like a cosmic renovation project.
Exactly. And it goes even deeper. There's this concept in numerology called karmic debt, which is often linked to the number 13.
Karmic debt. Okay, now you're really taking us into the deep end.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you do bad things in this life, you rack up karmic debt, and then 13 comes knocking.
Well, it's not necessarily about punishment or, cosmic revenge.
Okay, good, because I've definitely made a few questionable decisions in my day.
We all have. But think of it more like maybe there are things you haven't quite learned, lessons you haven't fully grasped, maybe from this life or a past life, who knows? And these things, they kind of linger until you deal with them.
So 13's like a wake-up call, telling you to pay your dues.
In a way, it's about facing those unresolved issues, learning from them, and growing.
Okay, so less about punishment, more about personal growth and evolution.
Exactly. It's about stepping into your full potential, becoming the best version of yourself, even if it takes a little, shall we say, encouragement from the universe.
I like it. It's like 13 is this cosmic life coach pushing you to level up.
There you go. And it's fascinating how differently this whole concept of 13 plays out across different cultures. I mean, we've talked about how some cultures, that they saw it as a harbinger of doom, right? But others, they had a totally different take on it.
Yeah, like the Aztecs. They were all about that base 13 life. Their calendar, their cosmology, it was all built around the number 13. And for them, it wasn't unlucky at all. It was actually considered sacred.
Right, right. They believed in 13 heavens, for one thing. And their calendar, like you were saying, was all based on these 13-day cycles, each one connected to a different god representing this unique energy.
It's really a completely different perspective, isn't it? While other cultures are freaking out about 13, the Aztecs are building their whole world around it, seeing it as this powerful force of creation and transformation.
Yeah, almost like a divine blueprint. Exactly. And they weren't the only ones. Ancient Egyptians, they saw 13 as connected to the afterlife.
Oh, right. But not in like a spooky, scary way.
No, no, not at all. More like a transition, moving from one state of being to another.
Okay, that makes sense. Kind of like, graduating to a new level in a video game.
There you go. Exactly. A transformation, not a termination. And you even see this idea in Hinduism. They had this ritual on the 13th day after death, all about freeing the soul from its earthly ties.
Wow, that's fascinating. So we've gone from 13 being this symbol of bad luck and doom to like a gateway to spiritual liberation.
It's pretty wild when you think about it, right? Just goes to show how much our cultural background, our beliefs, they really color how we see something as simple as a number.
It really makes you think, right? Like, where does the true power of 13 actually lie? Is it in the number itself, or is it in us? In the meaning we give it?
Now, that is the million-dollar question, and it makes me think about triskaidekaphobia.
Triskaideka what now?
Triskaidekaphobia. It's the fear of the number 13. Comes from the Greek words for 3, 10, and fear.
Oh, right, of course. Triskaidekaphobia. Yeah, for such a complex word, it's amazing how common that fear actually is.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. How many buildings have you been in that just skip right over the 13th floor?
So many. Or airlines that skip row 13. It's like this unspoken rule. We can't say 13 out loud, but everyone's thinking it.
Exactly. It's like this weird collective avoidance strategy. And it's not just buildings and planes, right? Don't some athletes refuse to wear the number 13 too?
Oh, absolutely. They'll choose a different number, even if it means like wearing 22 minus 9 or something.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Statistically speaking, Friday the 13th is no more or less unlucky than any other day of the year.
Right. So is it just all in our heads? Or is there something about our fear, our belief in the power of 13 that actually ends up influencing what happens?
Whoa. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Yeah. We fear 13, so we act differently on Friday the 13th. And then because we're acting differently, maybe that leads to different outcomes.
It really makes you wonder. And it reminds us that our beliefs, even about something like a number, they have power.
No doubt about it. So I guess what we've learned today is that the number 13, it's not so simple after all.
Definitely not. It's a number steeped in history, superstition, cultural significance, and ultimately I think it's a reminder that a lot of things in life are open to interpretation.
Well said. It's how we choose to see those things that really matters.
Exactly.
This has been amazing. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into, well, I guess the deep end of the number 13.
It's been my pleasure.
And for everyone listening, we'll leave you with this final thought. Does the meaning we find in numbers, good or bad, come from the numbers themselves, or does it come from our own human need to find meaning and patterns in the world around us? Thanks for listening.